There's been much talk about the recent Standard & Poor's downgrade of Barbados to junk bond status. What is your take or your opinion on this downgrade and the rationale S&P's offered?
Well, first of all, the downgrade is not surprising because, as you recognize, with the world recession from since 2008 and the subsequent tailspin of what's happening throughout both Europe and the USA, there will have been a ripple effect and impact on the Caribbean in general. Barbados specifically was a struggling economy during that period of time, and I think we have come to a crescendo impact on our economy today, and therefore we're seeing the residual effects of what is coming out of both Europe and the USA and impacting us here. Our ability or inability to borrow on the international market is a significant mark on us as a nation, and therefore our capacity to repay those levels of borrowing that were required to stabilize and keep our economy buoyant was very expensive and also unaffordable. Thus, the whole discussion about borrowing internally from the national insurance scheme. And these are some of the things that would be red flags, in my view, for any country to start to relook and rethink how they want to finance the deficit.
And what are some of the major impacts or effects, I should say, that this downgrade would have on our economy?
First of all, we also recognize that from the last two budgets offered by the Honourable Minister Christopher Sinclair, we recognize that there was a dampening effect on the purchasing power of the individual citizen through a removal of certain allowances, increase in indirect taxation, particularly the VAT from the 15% to the 17.5%. And therefore, once you remove that purchasing power and also increase the indirect taxation, then the ability for the average person or citizen in Barbados to acquire the same set of goods and services will become a little bit more unaffordable, or they will have to discontinue certain purchases for which they were accustomed to. Thus, your standard of living effectively would have been reduced. As a consequence, the economy has suffered not just from the individual citizens' purchasing power perspective, but also from the organizations, particularly small, medium-sized enterprises, who would not have those level of customers with that purchasing power ability to be able to keep their businesses turned over. So inventories will either become stagnant, will not be able to acquire new goods for resale, and therefore there is some stagnation in the economy overall at both levels, at the individual level and at the organizational level, particularly for the SME sector. In addition to that, you would recognize that the individual citizen who had a certain lifestyle would also be concerned that is there a question of a potential devaluation. And this there is a very significant issue to consider, because if you are impacted by a rating by Standard & Poor to the junk bond status, as being eschewed a lot over the last 72 hours, we would realize that we are on the brink of being threatened, that our parity of 2-to-1 ratio for the US dollar to the Barbados dollar is in threat. And if we don't come together as a nation and put aside our political partisanship and come together for the sake of every individual citizen and company within the country, then we will very well be asking the question, not if there will be a devaluation, but when would there be a devaluation. And I think that that is something that all of us as Barbadians need to be cognizant of and work collectively to be able to avoid such.
And what's the impact that this would have on the average Barbadian?
the average Barbadian would have to start to relook and rethink how they finance their lifestyle. And the financing lifestyle could either be done by their cash flows, liquid cash flows derived from their salaries, or it can be derived from the whole question of debt financing. So, and when I say debt financing, I'm talking about getting loans, I'm talking about credit card, debt, and so on. So the cost of borrowing on the individual basis would be very harsh in terms of the cost of borrowing would increase, because certainly there is a indicator there based on how we have been rated that the cost of living would go up inevitably at the individual level.